is the University of Michigan.
Touchdown, Michigan!
And midcourt, extra pass.
And it goes for the win! The three-pointer by Jordan Poole! Down the sideline! Peoples-Jones! Touchdown, Wolverines!
All right, welcome back to Blue by 90. I am here today joined by Jack and Kaylin as always, and we have the publisher of Wolverine Digest from Sports Illustrated, Brandon Brown, back with us, recurring guest once again back on the pod. Brandon, how you doing today?
Doing good, man. I didn't think I'd ever get another shot after I ran you guys around for 2 or 3 days last time. So appreciate you having me, man. Glad to be back.
Yeah, no
Glad to have you
worries.
back.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got a young baby, so you get the pass with that. We're just glad you've got a drink in your hand here today, and you can join us for some Michigan talk, even though most Michigan talk has not been on the positive side lately. We talked about it in our last podcast too, though. We do have some positive news from Michigan athletics, not Michigan football, but Michigan basketball is rolling, and they got 2 5-stars, and I believe both 5-stars signed their letters of intent today. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, basketball not quite as deeply plugged into basketball as I am football, but obviously, I mean, you see it on social media and getting a couple commitments within the last 2 weeks from Caleb Houston and Musa Diabate. I hope I'm saying his name close to correct there, but yeah, Juwan, man, killing it. Getting the number 1 class in the country. Like that's, I thought when they hired him, he'd be a good recruiter, but I think he's way out in front of where I thought he would be. And I think everybody would probably say that. Excited what he could potentially do. There was a lot of potential, but question marks, and he's answered the call for sure. So yeah, excited about what the basketball program is doing right now under Juwan Howard for sure.
Basketball has been, in the last week or two, the savior for Michigan fans because it's been the only positive to talk about. So shout out Juwan Howard for coming in at a great time here and saving the day. I do think the one thing, I don't want to get too deep into basketball, but we are, I think, just 2 weeks away. We don't even have a schedule yet, but I think we're tipping off in 2 weeks. Who knows what's going to happen? But yeah, I think that the only thing that Juwan Howard now has left to prove is A, developing those players, and then B, in-game coaching. He needs to make sure that he is, which is why he has the guys around him that he does, Howard Isley and some of these other guys. And so I think he's got to be able to, use his rotation well and prove that he can coach in game. But the recruiting side, absolutely, like you said, he's already off the charts. So yeah, let's get right into football. Obviously, we're still in football season. I know that half the Michigan fan base, maybe more, would like it to be canceled or finished or never even have started. But Wisconsin is coming up this week. They're 1-2 with losses to Michigan State and Indiana, as we all know. So let's go right into it with Wisconsin. They haven't played in 2 weeks. The last we saw, Graham Mertz was looking like a Heisman contender, throwing for 5 touchdowns and about 1,000 passing yards. So what do you think we can expect to see from Wisconsin on the field this Saturday?
Yeah, it's tough, man. I've been thinking about this one a lot. I mean, it's just, I talked to some people who cover Wisconsin, and they're kind of in the same boat too. I mean, after not having played for 2 weeks, like, who's available? Is Mertz even for sure available? I remember the timeline was kind of like, okay, he's positive today. 21 days would be the day after the Michigan game, but I think since then there's been it was actually a couple days before. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Is it Graham Mertz, and how's he look? Has he been practicing? Is he still, in game shape? I mean, there's a lot of questions to ask about that. Is there anybody else that's going to be sitting out as of right now on what is this Wednesday night? They're going to play, but I mean, something could pop up within the next 48 hours and all of a sudden there is no game. So this is one of the weirder ones, obviously, that we've seen a ton of games in the SEC getting canceled. I know It sounds like Ohio State and Rutgers is going to be or has already been canceled. So it's just like you're hoping that they play, and you hope that everybody's healthy first of all, and then you hope that Michigan doesn't lay an egg again and look awful against another pretty good team. I mean, like, I don't know how they lose to Michigan State. I can't compute that. Like, Indiana's a good team, but again, Michigan hadn't lost to them since I think before any of you guys were born, and I was just a little guy. So I don't know, man. I mean, I think that Wisconsin is not as good as they were last year. You know, they lost Jonathan Taylor, one of the best running backs we've seen in recent years, but Mertz is the real deal. I saw him as a recruit and remembered thinking, like, damn, he's going to be a pain in the butt when he's at Wisconsin, and it's happened a little earlier with Jack Cohn getting hurt, but I don't know. I mean, do we see Jack Cohn? Do we see some of these other guys that they have sitting out? Or is there even going to be a game? So there's just a lot more question marks, I think, going into this one than if it was like a regular year and we knew who we were going to see and we knew exactly how it was going to look on the field.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, too. I was looking at Wisconsin. Obviously, they only played one game. They beat Illinois. And I was looking at Illinois' schedule, and they are 0-3 with losses to, obviously, Wisconsin, Purdue, and then Minnesota blew them out. And Minnesota's a team that Michigan made look bad and who I think is a bad team. I mean, do we think Wisconsin is that good, or did they have a weak one just like Michigan and maybe they come out and look not so great on Saturday? I mean, that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I think that's entirely possible. I do. I mean, Illinois, we actually just put up a story today of, the Big Ten power rankings, and they were last. Like, they look bad. They look really bad. I don't know how many games they'll win this year, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's only one game too for Wisconsin to try to get a feel for what they are. And again, it could have been like we saw with Michigan in week one, just hitting on all cylinders. I wouldn't expect Graham Mertz to only throw one incomplete pass. Again, I think that's what he finished with in that first game. 5 touchdowns, like we said, I think multiple in the first half. So I find myself feeling about as uninformed about this one as I felt about a game in a long time. So it's just, kind of a wait and see. And then with Michigan too, like which team of them is going to show up? Jim Harbaugh hinted at some new tweaks and some new things that they've been working on. I don't know what that means. Maybe it's just lip service. I don't know. But lots and lots of unknowns and question marks for me.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of wishful thinking on, Michigan fans' part, hoping that the other team, something happens, something trips them up, and then we can squeeze out a win. I also thought it was funny, if anybody saw, I posted an article on our Facebook where someone was comparing Graham Mertz to Russell Wilson. I was like, oh my gosh, if that's how this game's going to go, like, I might not even watch it.
It's like Michigan fans, like comparing Joe Milton before he ever took a snap to Cam Newton and Pat Mahomes and everyone else. So at least we know that there are other people as crazy as us. So that's nice. I think that it'll be the problem with Wisconsin versus Michigan in the matchup on Michigan's side is that it seems like what they have never done before is throw the ball well. And so then I was thinking, oh, well, Michigan might be okay then because they've been okay against the run this year. Well, guess what? Graham Mertz comes out and all of a sudden he's like unbelievable in the pass. So I imagine that they're going to do the exact same shit as Michigan State and Indiana did and just chuck it up to their receivers. So I did see some positives in the second half of Michigan versus Indiana, though, on the offensive side especially. So I think maybe the hopeful thinking for Michigan fans is that they build on that. What do you think on Joe Milton and his what he's done this year, maybe even in just the second half against Indiana? Do you think that he still can be a great quarterback? Because he's been pretty average so far, but he obviously hasn't had much help.
I feel pretty good about Joe Milton. I do. I mean, he was put in a bad situation last game. Didn't throw his first interception until it was like we're throwing all the time because they're losing. So he's been taking care of the ball, which was a big problem, a big concern that everybody had coming into the year. Accuracy, he's missed some easy ones. He's still putting way too much mustard on certain throws when he shouldn't. But it is his third start. I mean, you got to give him a little bit of a leash and let him work his way into it. I am absolutely dumbfounded as to why there were no designed quarterback runs last week. Now, I don't think there was one. Maybe one, but I think he carried the ball 4 times in the box score, but I think sacks count towards that, and so do scrambles. I don't remember any of the keeping on zone reads. I don't remember any, power sweeps. They just didn't do it. And I know somebody said on Twitter that he had a wrap on his thumb, and if his thumb is so bad where you have to change your entire game plan and you can't even run the quarterback anymore when that's supposed to be a big part of the offense and something that he does pretty damn well, then he shouldn't be playing. I mean, if you have to alter everything you do because his thumb is hurting, then he probably shouldn't be in there because
or
it just didn't.
Just go down and put your thumb, protect your thumb if you're running. That's not that crazy. And from watching the game back, to your point, the only run he had, I believe, was a scramble right up the middle on 3rd and 18, and he got about 12 yards. And so he actually did pretty well with the scramble. But his best passes in the third quarter and early in the fourth quarter was when he scrambled out of the pocket and got on the move. So if I'm Josh Gaddis, let's get Joe Milton on the move, because it seems like the only time these Michigan wide receivers get separation is when they have to get off their routes and kind of do the scramble drill.
Yeah, it's just been I find myself it's like Groundhog's Day, man. Last year, I don't know how many times I'm yelling at the TV Shea, keep it. Just keep it one time and run around the end there's nobody there. And then, I mean, here we are again, seeing it with Joe Milton, who's bigger, stronger, faster. I mean, it's so frustrating. I don't feel, and then you watch Michigan, you watch them lose to Michigan State, you watch them get boat raced by Indiana, and then the next game, whatever it is, comes on after that, and it's just offense is just fly. I'm just is it that hard? Is it really that hard for Michigan to do some of those same things? They have talented players. They've got speed at receiver. They've got versatile running backs. They've got a talented quarterback. They just make it look so hard on offense sometimes. And then obviously, the problems that have been there all year on defense with the corners on an eye. It looks like they're fighting themselves so much on both sides of the ball and just can't get out of their own way. Penalties, discipline. It's just everything feels like it's coming off the rails right now. I don't know why that is. I don't know how that can be in year 6 when you've got some talent. It makes you go crazy. It really does. And whether you're a fan or not, I mean, you can hear it in the analysts' voices. Brock Heward was like, "What do we want? What is this? What are we watching?" And now we've seen the comments this week from Urban Meyer. He's like, "There can't be that big of a drop off. That's Michigan and Indiana. Why did it look like that?" And it's just really puzzling. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying I know more about football than Josh Gaddis and Don Brown, but it seems pretty damn obvious to every single person watching that it shouldn't look how it looks, and it shouldn't be coached how it's being coached. But they just, I mean, 2 to 3 weeks in the season already, we just see it week in and week out.
Yeah, and you brought up the coaching. I mean, you've put out a number of articles, going on the coaching, and you've been very vocal about your disappointment in what you've seen so far this year. I mean, what's your take on Harbaugh, Don Brown? I mean, who do you think's to blame here?
Yeah, I think you can spread it around. I really do. I mean, I talked about the weird calls on offense. Everybody's talked about spending so much on man-to-man coverage with Vincent Gray and Jamon Green, who just frankly don't look good enough to do it. I mean, I covered those guys as recruits. I don't want to disparage a player. They're 18, 19, 20-year-old kids trying to do the best they can. I'm not going to dump on them like you maybe would a pro, but they just don't look good enough. And if a coach who's been coaching as long as Don Brown has been can't recognize that and switch up or change up or put his guys in a position to succeed, what do you do? I mean, you can't let guys that really aren't superstars, Ricky White. I keep calling him Ricky White. Is it Ricky White or Ricky?
Yeah.
Ricky White.
Ricky White.
Called him Ricky White. Yep. Times that past week. Ricky White and Ty Freifogel having career day. Ty Freifogel had a career day in the first half against Michigan last week. He had the most receiving yards he's ever had as a Hoosier in the first half last week.
Jesus Christ.
We know White went for 200 yards and almost in a touchdown. That's not working, Don. It's just not working. So you got to fix it. You got to change it. I know I'm preaching to the choir. We've all seen it. The analysts are talking about it after every long play. They're just trying to go deep and catch the ball, or they're trying to draw a PI, or they're trying to draw a defensive holding, and it's working every time. And it's resulted in 2 bad losses. And then on the offensive side, again, if Joe Milton was a little dinged up, and that's why they're altering the play calls, I get it. But again, it's not working, and they just keep trying to do the same thing. Against Michigan State, it was like inside zone after inside zone after inside zone, and the rushing attack looked awful. And then against Indiana, it gets even worse. They had 13 yards, man. Like it's just puzzling how dudes who know so much about football, clearly they know so much about football, and they're being paid handsomely to do a better job than this. They're just not. And like, I don't know if I should say I probably shouldn't say who, but one of the Michigan coaches texted me after the game because of some of the tweets I put out. Like, I know these dudes personally. I talked to them about recruiting during the offseason. Some of them I've had a relationship before they got to Michigan. And I tweeted out, like, the Michigan coaches shouldn't have jobs after this game. And one of them was like, bro, I can't believe you said that. And I'm like, sorry, dude, it's a results business. And I run a website. I don't own it. Sports Illustrated does. If it's terrible and it's in the tank and it's losing every week, I get fired. That's what happens. Like, in the real world, if you suck at your job, you don't keep your job. And so it just is what it is. I mean, it's kind of harsh. And, like, yeah, those dudes have families, and it's nothing personal. But, like, the announcers are baffled. The fans are baffled. We're all baffled. I don't know how it can look like that at a place like Michigan that has so many resources and seemingly has everything you really need on paper to win those games at least. I'm not saying they're going to go out and beat Clemson and beat Alabama and beat Ohio State and beat Georgia regularly, but once in a while would be cool. And then beating the teams that you need to beat is the expectation, just bottom line.
Woo. We got Brandon fired up, guys. I like this.
And Brandon, obviously, you brought up the secondary, right? Like, you know, I feel like Don Brown's taking all the heat for that, but you don't hear a whole lot about Zordich getting a lot of heat from it when he's supposed to be developing these guys to be able to do their job. I mean, how much blame do you think he should be getting?
Yeah, Jack, actually, I want to tag on to that question as well, because I saw Zordich was on, like, Inside Michigan Football Program, and he seemed to be echoing what Jim Harbaugh was saying after the game about, like, hey, we're seeing these guys perform in practice, but we're not seeing it in the game. There's a disconnect. Just to tag on to Jack's question as well, I mean, do you think that's just coach speak, just trying to make excuses, or is there maybe a real problem there?
Yeah, that one's tough. I mean, that's another one of those answers from Harbaugh where you don't know. You don't know if it's coach speak. You don't know if, like, they really are puzzled. Like, man, that's a play Vincent Gray makes 10 times out of 10 inside the field house. Like, you know, I think it was the touchdown to Freifogel. He was like in step. He looked back, hand up, and the ball just glanced by his hand, and Freifogel catches it for a touchdown. That would be a play where I'd be like, we see him make those plays. We know he can make that play. He's right there. He's not getting burnt. He didn't fall down. Just unlucky, bad luck in that particular instance. So I would imagine there's probably some truth to that. I mean, look, I say this all the time. Every year when a quarterback struggles, people say, like, well, why isn't Dylan McCaffrey playing? And I've already heard people this year, like, get McNamara in there. And I'm just like, guys, they're not putting crappy players in the game on purpose. Like, that doesn't do very much for them and their profession and what they do. Like, they're going to play the guys that are the best at the position. So, I think it was after the Michigan State game, Jim Harbaugh said that Vincent Gray was his best corner. That worries me a little bit, but I think he's probably telling the truth. He probably is the best corner on the team. So you expect him to make those plays. Back to the original question, it's tough to put much blame on Zordich for me, because he's not the one saying we're running man-to-man all the time and it's one-on-one out there, and I hope you do well. Sure, he's coaching technique, and if it's constantly a thing about, like, they're not looking back or they're way out of position or their footwork isn't right, the holding and the pass interference, like, that probably falls on Zordich a little bit more. If he's teaching them to be real grabby and real handsy with them, then that probably needs to be toned down a little bit. But I still find myself not putting as much on a position coach as I do a coordinator. I just think that's kind of the natural. I mean, that it trickles down. It's head coach, it's offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, then the position coaches, just like it is with the players. The quarterbacks always get more blame than anybody else, even if there's drops. It seems to always come down to, well, look at the quarterback's completion percentage. Like, well, he put it right on the dude's chest and he dropped it. That one shouldn't count against him, but it does. So Zordich also gets the benefit of the doubt for me a little bit because he's been so good before. I mean, Michigan's had some of the best corners in the Big Ten for a handful of years. Again, talented guys who are playing on Sundays now in a couple cases, but I still think it's expecting guys to do things that they don't look like they can do on a regular basis. And we saw it We saw it last year too. I mean, it was Josh Metellus chasing receivers who run 4.4. Like, Josh Metellus is a 4.6 guy. He's not catching that dude. Like, why do you keep asking him to do it? So for me, it's more Don Brown than it is Zordich. But I mean, it's across the board at this point. It really is. I mean, maybe I was coming in a little hot with no coach should keep their job. I think there's probably two. If I was whoever the next head coach is at Michigan, whenever that is, if it's this year, 2 years, 3 years from now, there's probably 3 or 4 coaches on that staff that would get on. If it was me, that would get a hard look for staying on board. And Zordich, to me, would be one of them. So that's where I'm at with that.
So you're talking about kind of coaches being blamed versus the talent being blamed. And you're the recruiting guy. Obviously, you at WolverineDigest.com is where you guys can find him. And I'm going back into our recruiting classes, and every year Jim Harbaugh's had a top 10 class pretty much, except for 2018, which 2018 has Jamon Green, has Sammy Faustin, has Vincent Gray, has these guys that are on the field right now. And all those guys are 3 stars. And so I think what we're seeing is 3-star talent on the field. And this is what you get if you can't recruit at that top 10 level and get 4 or 5 stars. And there's something to, developing 3 stars into better players or getting the best out of your guys. But even, Miles Sims, who was the 1 4-star corner in that class, is now at Georgia Tech. He transferred. So I think that as much as you want to shit on Don Brown and Zordich and all these other coaches, I mean, you do have to hold them up to the recruiting, because recruiting is part of their job as well, right? But it's something with the talent level here that these guys are 3-star guys, and we're getting 3-star production out of them on the field against other guys out there. Indiana probably has some 4-star wide receivers that they're playing with. I don't think Ricky White's a 4-star guy, but it's not the talent level that we've seen in the past. Like Lavert Hill and those guys are 4-star players, and we got the best out of them. So we're just seeing a drop in talent, and it's starting with the recruiting in this class.
I'll say a little bit on that. I'm not in the stars don't matter camp, but I think there is. You can look a little deeper, and somebody. I used to cover recruiting exclusively at the Wolverine.com. That was all I did. So back when these guys were being recruited, that was all I covered was their process and where they came from. And to me, especially with the 2 starting corners right now, Jamon Green and Vincent Gray, I think Jamon Green was actually a 4-star on Rivals, maybe not on 24/7. Vincent Gray was a 3-star on both, I'm pretty sure. But to me, it's in those instances, and specifically, I can speak to them specifically because I covered them. It was more about who wanted them and how hard they were being recruited by other programs, and it wasn't on par with Michigan. In my opinion, Vincent Gray was committed to Missouri before he flipped to the Wolverines. Both German and Jamon Green were at a big time program in Texas, and I don't think either of them had an offer from Texas. I don't think they had offers from Texas A&M. I mean, so when you start to look at these kids that are at Michigan right now, I think it goes beyond stars even to look at, because you see this every year. It's like, oh, Michigan State got a commitment from that kid over Michigan. And I'm like, well, the Michigan coaches haven't talked to that kid in 9 months. So he might have got an offer when he was a sophomore, but that doesn't mean that he could have committed to Michigan today when he picked Michigan State. That's just one, random hypothetical example. You see that all the time. You see the tweet, so-and-so commits to SMU over Texas, Texas A&M, Baylor, Oklahoma, and I'm like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Those offers came through when he was a 6'4", 215-pound freshman, and now he's still 6'4", 215 pounds, and he's slow. So that's why he's going to that school. So it's a little deeper than that, than just the stars, but I'm with you, Justin. I think it is a talent thing. I mean, you can put on the tape and watch them grabbing and pulling and chasing and getting beat on deep balls and not adjusting to the ball. And Jamon Green's had his hands on 5 balls this year probably and hasn't caught one yet. So I'm with you. I think it's just a kind of a product of what they've brought in. And again, Jim Harbaugh used to get the benefit of the doubt with those guys. I mean, you saw a lot of 3-star guys outperform their rankings and become big-time players for Michigan and make it to the league. I mean, Khalid Hudson's a prime example. Probably was underrated coming out of high school, but was a tweener. Didn't really have a position, but they found one for him. He was very good at it, and now he's, playing for the Redskins, or the Washington football team. Sorry. I think you see a little bit. It's a lot of things. It's coaching, it's technique, it's talent. It's a lot. There's a lot going on right now in Ann Arbor for sure.
And looking at the secondary too, just to go back to those two guys, Jamon Green and Vincent Gray. Honestly, I didn't remember that Jamon was a 4-star guy. But looking at the film this year and just watching the game, Jamon has seemed like he's been the number one DB to me personally. He looks like he's covering the defenders better. Clearly, he's not getting called for as many penalties as Vincent Gray has. What's your take on that? I mean, do you think the coaches actually believe Vincent Gray's the number one guy, or do you think Jamon Green, could be that number one?
I think right now it's probably kind of by default. Vincent Gray has played a lot more, a little bit more comfortable being on the field. Jamon, both. I know we haven't seen much of German, but I remember covering both of them because it's kind of cool that Michigan got twin brothers from Texas. I remember I never saw him play in person in high school, but I talked to a lot of people that did. Their coaches watched a lot of their tape, and they were both kind of touted for just being kind of freaky natural athletes, really long, can really. And we've kind of seen that. I mean, like you just said, not as much glaring weaknesses in my opinion. But again, Jamon hasn't played that much and is kind of thrust into the situation against teams that are taking shots at those guys because they saw it against Michigan State and it worked. And so, Daxton Hill has done a great job of pretty much taking the number one away from each opponent. Rashad Bateman didn't go off. Jalen or Jaden Green for Michigan State, the real fast, speedy number 5, went off against Rutgers, had one catch for 18 yards against Michigan. And then Whop Phillier had a lot of catches, but most of them were at or behind the line of scrimmage. He only had like 75 yards receiving on 10 or 11 catches. So I wouldn't really say he went off. He got his hands on a lot of balls, but he didn't really do much with it. It was Freifogel. It was Ricky White. It was the other guys going up against Vincent Gray and Jamon Green who were kind of having their way. So, ranking them right now, I think it's pretty close. I mean, I think Vincent Gray is probably a little bit more confident, although I would assume that's shaken at this point. But yeah. Neither of them look like, okay, I'm put that guy on the other team's number one and that guy's cool for the day. I don't say that about either of them, and that's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, not looking forward to going up against Chris Olave and Jackson Smith and Jigba or whatever his name is. That's fucking A. They're going to light us up.
I said that after the Michigan State game, and then again, getting ready for the Indiana game. I'm like, Ohio State's got 4 guys way better than both of those dudes. So what does that look like? You only got one Dax Hill. So you better figure it out in a couple of weeks here.
They're going to come out 5 wide, like all game, and just say, we're going to go deep nearly every time. Try to stop us.
We're playing that prevent defense from Madden, right?
We're going to give up like 30 yards a pass just so we don't give up a touchdown and get beat deep.
That could be, I mean, if I had to guess right now, that's going to be the worst loss of the Harbaugh era to Ohio State. And the last 2 have been horrible. I mean, last year was 34? What was the score? 39? No, not 39. In the 30s. I think it's going to be 40 plus this year, based on what we've seen so far.
I mean, Ryan Day, man, he wasn't messing around when he said he was going to hang 100. I think it's a legitimate thing that could happen this year.
That dude is a savage. He will not let up. He will not take knees. He will not stop throwing the ball. It's be bad. It's gonna be bad.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't have the personnel in to take a knee, so I had to run it up to 100.
I'm pretty sure anybody could take a knee. You just literally fall down and you're good. So
did he say that after that late touchdown? Is that what you're referencing? Is that what that was?
Right.
Yeah.
That won me $50, by the way. So I'm good with that.
Yeah, there you go.
Like the latest backdoor cover I've ever seen, right there.
Hey, that's a smart Michigan. Is you can have your heart broken by the Wolverines, but win money on the Buckeyes.
You can check my Bovada account for last week and see where I put my money in that Indiana game, too, if you want to.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a smart play as well. And I haven't seen the line since it opened, but apparently Michigan's favored against Wisconsin too.
I looked at it today, and it looked like it was Wisconsin by 3.5.
I thought it was Wisconsin, and another close one though. Yeah, another
Yeah.
really close one. Yeah.
All right, it might have started at Michigan and then probably I'm assuming Wisconsin got hammered right away to flip the line, but yeah. So one thing I did want to ask you about on the recruiting side as well. I know you're not as deep in recruiting as you were once, but we saw after the Michigan State game, Rayshawn Benny flipped. I wouldn't say he flipped because he wasn't committed to the Wolverines, but he was heavily favored to go to Michigan and then kind of last minute was very favored to go to Michigan State and then committed this week. How much does that really have to do with this year's Michigan State game or what we're seeing just from Michigan in 2020 and also Michigan State in 2020? Or has that been a long time coming?
Normally I would say not much. Normally, in just about every other occurrence, if we wanted to look back and think about like, oh, I thought he was going here and then he went there, I normally think it doesn't have much to do with just one game. Very rarely. I mean, these kids have been building this relationship and looking at the schools for 3 and 4 years in some cases. Some of them get their offers before they even get to high school. So normally I would say it has nothing to do with it. They were going back and forth. Maybe it was a little, a drop in the bucket here, another drop in the bucket there. This coach said this coach said that. I think there's way too much that leads into it. But Benny specifically, this last one felt a lot more like it had to do with that game specifically than another one I can think of. I know a couple of years ago, Zach Harrison, when Michigan got destroyed by Ohio State, that felt like that swung it quite a bit as well. But most of the time, I don't think that one game, one outcome has much to do with it. At the same time, though, Benny was supposed to commit in mid or early October, and he canceled that commitment date, which was obviously way before the Michigan State game. But that one had a feel of like, he's going to Michigan, he's going to Michigan, he's going to Michigan. Michigan State's hanging in there. Oh, they beat Michigan. Yeah, I'm going there. It kind of felt like that. I never talked to him directly about it. I've talked to his coach a little bit, and he kind of told me, he's like, I think State might have him. And this was before that game happened. So I think he was kind of leaning that way already, but I do think Michigan State winning in that first matchup when nobody gave him a shot, I think he was kind of like, all right, I believe in what Mel Tucker's doing. They did a good job recruiting me. That's where I'm going to go. And that's a big miss, man. I mean, that was one of Michigan's top defensive tackle targets that they needed to get that kid. I don't think in terms of, I'm not knocking him because he picked Michigan State, but I don't think in terms of like talent, he's like, oh my God, that's a make or break kind of kid. He's really good. Was actually viewed as an offensive tackle earlier in his career, but Michigan always liked him on defense. But just the way that it went and how bad Michigan wanted him and the fact that he kind of did flip at the end is that's not good. That's not a good look for what Michigan's trying to do in state at all.
And I think the big part of that is that he's very good, and Michigan hasn't gained a commitment from a defensive tackle since Greg Madison went to Ohio State. So they are in desperate need. Isn't that a crazy stat? I mean, it seems like Greg Madison was here 17 years ago. I mean, obviously it's only been 3 years? I believe.
I think 2.
2. Yeah.
Either way, though, man, like that, a defensive tackle, I don't think people realize how important that is to a defense to plug up the middle right there and stop. And the fact that Sean Nua has not gotten a single commit is very troubling for the future of that defense. You can have Salt and Pepper, you can have Josh Uche and Chase Winovich and whoever you want on the edge, but if you can't stop anything up the middle, which even the 5-star Mozzie Smith doesn't seem like he can do right now, then you're in trouble. And so for the future, when the defensive tackles like Rayshawn Benny are flipping, it doesn't look good. So yeah, let's move on from that to let's get into Harbaugh, I guess, because everybody wants to talk about it. Harbaugh's been on the hot seat since he lost to Utah in his first game, right? It was like, it was like everyone was done with the experiment after game 1. But it just, we've talked about it here, a lot, and everybody's talked about it. He doesn't seem like the same guy. He doesn't seem like he's moving things in the right direction. What do you think of where Jim Harbaugh's head is at right now? What is he thinking? Is he still thinking long term here? Is he thinking I can still do this, or is he like, they're still gonna pay me $7 million. I'll collect a paycheck. I'll win my 8 to 9 games. Obviously this year not, but and we'll call it a day.
Complicated question. First of all, the money thing. I don't think Harbaugh operates that way. I really don't. I know he's been paid really well and he's a rich dude and he's got a big contract. I really don't think that has ever been a big factor for him in terms of like, I'll go take that job just because they're going to pay me a lot. I don't think he's wired that way. Dude, nobody wants to do better at their job than that guy. I mean, he's Captain Comeback Man. He's as true of a Michigan man as there is. I think that whole movement needs to die anyway, but he doesn't, and he's as plugged into that as he could possibly be. Bo was like his second dad. He grew up part of his childhood in Ann Arbor. That's a really hard question. Where is his head at right now? I really think so. After the Michigan State game, the press conference, which obviously is via Zoom, we're not in person this year for any of the media stuff, but that was the most drained, dead, just defeated look I've ever seen him, and that's after 30-point beatdowns from Ohio State, and that's after the JT was short game, and that's after the bad loss to Iowa that probably kept him out of the playoff hunt a couple 3-4 years ago, whatever that was. He just looked like beat down. And worse than the Michigan State fumble return. I mean, it was, wow, that was really bad. I just lost that game. That's what it looked like to me. I know every single year he's been here, there's been talk about him going to the NFL. I think this year it's got the most legs. You can't help but you can't.
Who's gonna take him?
It's actually Wood still. I think a lot of teams still think that he's better suited for the NFL, and it would just work out better. The Jets are probably going to have an opening. The Falcons already have an opening.
The Lions
have an opening. There's going to be some jobs that are not horrible. The Jets is pretty horrible, but if they get the number one pick,
those are all pretty fucking bad, Brandon.
Looks a little bit better maybe come April or May, but man, it's just, you can't ignore the fact that he doesn't have a contract extension. I haven't fact checked this, but I think it's worth mentioning. And if you guys have heard otherwise, you can shoot me down right away. But I heard the other day that he's the only Power 5 conference entering the last year of his contract. Only Power 5 conference coach entering the last year of his contract.
I think that was right. Yeah.
That's true. Like, what other team is not telling recruits that, is not telling? I mean, everybody's focusing on that right now. And I do think that, being in a pandemic and, you don't want to re-up a coach for $7 million a year when everybody's getting axed. I get the optics a little bit, but the optics about everything else are pretty shitty right now too. So that's a really hard question to answer because Jim's he's kind of a weird dude. He's aloof. You don't know if what he's saying is really what he means or if there's some other meaning behind it, or if he's keeping things close to the vest or whatever. I don't think money's an issue. I don't think it's what you said, Justin, I'm getting $8 million to win my 8 or 9 games. I'm cool with that. I don't think that's it. I think he wants to win more than anything. He's a competitive dude. I think he still probably thinks he can, even if he might not truly believe it in his heart that he's the guy. But he doesn't want to get fired. Nobody wants to get fired. He doesn't want to walk away on his own because that pretty much admits that he can't get the job done. I think I just put an article about this today. I think if he leaves, it's got to be a job in the NFL. I think that's the only thing that gets him out of there. I really do. I just don't. Warren Manuel's not going to fire him, and he's not going to quit. So what does that do? Where does that leave the program, especially like I said, without that extension or with no extension sitting out there? It's a tough spot right now for him and for the program.
And do you think that? Let's say this does happen. Michigan doesn't extend him, or he doesn't come back, or he takes your job in the NFL. Who would be your top pick? Who do you think that Michigan could actually get to replace him?
Probably Bill Belichick, if I had to say. No,
There we go. There we go.
some of the answers on or some of the suggestions on Twitter, I'm just like, it's just like facepalm gif one after one
Honestly,
after another.
though, like the number one, I think it was Scott Bell put it out on Twitter. You know, he's kind of a comedian on Twitter, but like number 3 on that list, it was like Matt Campbell, Luke Fickell. Seriously, people put Urban Meyer as like a top choice. And it's like, dude,
look. If he would take it, I would hire him like that.
Oh,
like,
I mean, 100%.
Absolutely.
I couldn't hire him fast enough. I saw a really interesting tweet. It was another sports media person. I don't remember what market they were in. I apologize for not giving them credit because I'm going to plagiarize their tweet. But they said they said if everything was exactly the same, but Urban Meyer did everything he did at USC instead of Ohio State, he'd be the number one target for Michigan 100%. By a billion miles. But simply the fact that he coached at Ohio State, like everybody's like, no, not even an option. I think that's dumb. I mean, if you want to go back to like the whole Michigan man thing, like where did Bo come from? Everybody knows where he came from.
Exactly.
Like the best coach out there. I don't really know if Urban would take it. I remember there was some talk that in one of his early contracts that he wasn't allowed to take any other job except for Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Michigan, I think was like kind of all linked as jobs that he could potentially leave for. He's an Ohio guy, I think, right? And he coached, he was a graduate assistant at Notre Dame. So that Midwest vibe is there for him. It seems like just an insane pipe dream. I mean, like I said, I would take him in a heartbeat because it would be
the greatest accomplishment ever if Urban Meyer like went 7-0 against Michigan at Ohio State and then went undefeated against Ohio State at Michigan too. Like if he turned this around, that would be like, I mean, you're it. Better than Bill Belichick at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the who would you get argument is of course what everybody comes to right away. Like Jim's winning 73% of his games. Who are you going to get that can do that? And my answer is there's a lot of guys who could do that at Michigan, if I'm being honest. I think a lot of guys who know their stuff and are running wide open offenses. That would be one of my stipulations. I don't want a defensive guy. I want an offensive guy who's going to put points on the board and it's going to keep pace with all these other teams that are scoring 40 and 50 a game. I was just saying the other day, like Florida and Georgia, two of the most historically dominant defensive SEC grinded out, kill you on defense types of teams were playing against each other. It's 38-21 at halftime. Defense is dead, bro. Like you need to get a guy who can score now, big plays, explosive plays, 30 points at halftime, 45 points, 50 points at the end of the game. That's where college football is nowadays. Joe Burrow, those kind of offenses, a guy goes from nobody to the number one pick in the draft because of offense. That's what it is. So I know Brent Venables is probably like the sexiest name, and that's who everybody seems to want the most. I just don't know if I would go after a defensive guy. I really don't. I don't know if that would be my move. I would go after an offensive guy. So maybe it's Tony Elliott, Clemson's offensive coordinator. Maybe it's, Matt Campbell, Jason Candle. I mean, can you go from coaching Michigan? Like they tried that with Brady Hoke. That didn't work. I don't know. It's a tough question. It is because you think Jim Harbaugh and you automatically think like he's just really good because he's Jim Harbaugh, but he's not been really good. He hasn't been really good. He's like 26-18 over his last 44 games. That's 63% of a winning percentage.
Yeah.
There's a lot of coaches that can do that, win 60% of their games at Michigan. So, oh man, we put an article out that kind of just listed some names of potential candidates. It wasn't in order. It wasn't like go get this guy. It was just like here's some names to look at. Matt Campbell, yes. Luke Fickell, Jason Candle. I said Lance Leipold, who won like 1,000 games and lost 3 at Wisconsin Whitewater. But again, like Wisconsin Whitewater to Michigan, he's at Buffalo now, but that's a massive jump. You wonder if coaches like that can handle that kind of thing. Everybody just wants to find the next Lincoln Riley. Find some offensive-minded guru who's 32 years old, hire him, and he takes your program to another level. That's what everybody wants. And there might be 10 of those guys out there, but if you pick one that's not, then you get Brady Hoke and you get Rich Rod again, and nobody wants that. So I'm not Ward Manuel. I don't have to do that, but it's fun to talk about. There's not really an obvious answer to me at this point. That's what makes it tough. It seems like every year there's kind of like, one or two guys who are like the top choices for open jobs. I don't know if if USC has a coaching vacancy, like who are they getting? I just think that's kind of a broad question across the whole scope of college football right now.
Yeah, it feels like Jim Harbaugh is like dealing with a curse, right? Like I saw some stat that before the JT was short, he was 20-4 with like an 83% win percentage, like one of the best coaches of all time. And then ever since that moment, his win percentage has been like 63%.
I think that's the same thing, that I saw that I was referencing. Yeah, very different.
Yeah, exactly. Now, just to, play a little devil's advocate, I guess. I also saw somebody said Brian Kelly in year 7 went 4-8, but now we see him beating Clemson. So is it worth, waiting it out and hoping that we actually, reach the promised land, or do we, play the roulette wheel again?
Yeah, that's a good question. Notre Dame, and I think Notre Dame is always the school that Michigan should be compared to the most. They're not. They don't approach things the same way as Ohio State. Geographically, they're up against it when you compare them to like Alabama or Florida teams of the past, or Clemson now, or Florida State, or whatever. They don't have the recruiting grounds of those schools. It's just different. I think Notre Dame is a very easy comparison. They're the tradition, the old school, the do things the right way for the most, on the surface. The academics, the location. I mean, it's the easiest comparison. And Brian Kelly has, had Notre Dame in the playoff, and they're in the driver's seat to get there again this year. So that's an interesting question. I would look deeper than that, not just like where was he at in year 7 in that 4-8 season? Like, was he winning on the road against ranked teams? Was he winning as an underdog once in a while? Was he holding serve at home against teams that he shouldn't lose to? I mean, like, it's deeper than that, I think, and they've recruited similarly as well. Offensive line recruiting and development has been outstanding at Notre Dame. I think that's a big, big part of what they do. Probably defensive line, too, has been a little bit it's probably been close to on par with Michigan. Michigan has put some good defensive linemen in the league, but I think you got to look at a lot of different things. But that's a tough one. I hate the Dabo Swinney comparison. That one's just it's too different. Took Dabo whatever it was 6 or 7 years before he was winning an ACC championship or some. I don't know the exact number, but it's close to that. But the Yeah, man, 4-8 in year 7. I guess I didn't realize it was that far into his tenure that they did. I mean, it was just a couple years ago, but that's an interesting one. I'm personally, I'm over the Harbaugh experiment. I just am, in the way this. Oh, there's a lot to that, but I think it's time for a change.
I think the Brian Kelly thing is honestly it is a good comparison because it's Notre Dame, but the fact that he went 4-8 in year 7 is not a good comparison because he had already went 12-1 and had a national title appearance before that. So if Jim Harbaugh, even if we were 1-2 right now, and Jim Harbaugh had went to the college football playoff in 2016, maybe won a Big Ten title in 2018 too, nobody would give a shit. It'd be like, all right, it's fine. We're going to produce some of these guys. Next year's recruiting class is really good, blah, blah, blah. Like, the future is here. But it's the fact that he hasn't won any of those games, and he's regressed in every year, and that's why that's why the fans are revolting. It's because he hasn't produced shit. And it's going downhill. So I think the Brian Kelly thing, I get it because it's a 4-8 season and in between, good and good. But it's just if Jim Harbaugh, even if Jim Harbaugh, like after this year is say after the year 2020, Jim Harbaugh is 2-4 against Ohio State, which is not a good record against the team. People would love him. He'd be the greatest coach in the history of Michigan football because they would have went maybe not better than Bo, but like in recent years, obviously. And people would be going nuts over him going to the Big Ten championship, finally beating Ohio State. He would not even have to have a winning record versus Ohio State for him to be getting a big-ass contract extension and love from Michigan fans for the rest of ever.
It's a really and like I'm not giving, it's not sympathy because like Jim Harbaugh was brought to Michigan I mentioned earlier how every year in football there's like that one or two guys that you got to go get. He was that guy. There's no question. Michigan hired. He was that guy. I mean, Michigan fans were like, throwing parades and shit. It was like the biggest deal ever that Michigan was able to land him. So he's supposed to come in and compete. But you talk about if he was just 2-4 against Ohio State, like there's probably two teams in the whole country who plays Ohio State 6 times and wins twice. Maybe. Like, seriously, Clemson and Alabama might be it. I don't know if any team in the country is beating them 2 or 3 times when you play them 6 times. So that's not me necessarily defending it. It's just like it's kind of a perfect storm. Like, Michigan's a little bit down right now. Harbaugh seems to have lost something. He can't quite figure it out. And Ohio State, by the way, is the best they've ever been and recruiting better than anybody in the country not named Clemson and Alabama. And actually, they've been, like, better than them last year and I think this year. So it's again, perfect storm. 0-6, which I mean, there's nobody picking Michigan to beat Ohio State this year. So it's going to be 0-6. How do you defend that? If that's not Jim Harbaugh, he doesn't even get a chance to get to 0-6, in my opinion. So it's just one of those things where it's like it just feels like a change is needed. And they could go out and get you could go out and hire any number of 30 coaches to get 6 cracks at Ohio State, and you probably don't beat them very much because they're really freaking good. But that's what he was brought here for, and that's what everybody thought they were getting when he was hired in 2014. Sorry.
and it's honestly like, again, the sympathy card, I don't think he deserves it, but a little bit he does, because a couple bounces go different ways, and his entire tenure is different. The Michigan State punt is different. Michigan State doesn't win the Big Ten title that year, and Michigan's in the race probably going into the Ohio State game at the end of the year in year one for him. So, like, it's already off to a great start. Obviously, JT was short. Even in 2017 versus Ohio State, if John O'Korn doesn't throw the worst interception of all time, they could win a football game with fucking John O'Korn at quarterback against Ohio State. And so, like, and then in 2018 they go into Ohio State and then get their ass kicked, but like they're in a position there in the last game of the season to go to a Big Ten title game, which is all you can ask of a coach, right? Is to give yourself a chance at the end of the season. So as shitty as it's been, because they have came up short in every single one of those opportunities, they've been right there, and a couple different games go different ways. And we're talking about Jim Harbaugh in a completely different tone. And so that's where it's like, I do think there's some sympathy there. It's just like, damn, as a coach, you can only control so much. You can't control that long snapper, having a bad snap and the punter just throwing it to the side. Like, you can't control that. You can't control the JT was short. You can't control John. He probably did as much as he could with John O'Korn, and I mean that was like literally the worst throw I've ever seen in my life. So as much as he can control, I just think that like he's done a pretty damn good job to put a team on the field that can compete with most every team. And so the problem is that in the past 2 years, it's gone really, really downhill. And so that's why people are done with it. So I don't even have a question here. That was just me ranting. So anybody can comment on that.
You had me sold on Harbaugh after that, man. Keep him around, extend him, give him a 20-year contract. Let's go.
Lifetime deal. No.
He wasn't that like the rumor for that was like 2 years ago? That was the rumor. Jesus Christ! Think about how that was not that long ago, man. That was not that long ago.
You remember that 2018 season, right?
Yeah.
We were coming, that was the revenge tour, right? I mean, We were all hyped. We were like, wow, this team, for whatever reason, they got some steam. They look unstoppable. We were like favored going into Ohio State for the first time since like 2000. And we all thought like, let's go. This is it. This is Jim's shot. And then we just got absolutely demolished. I remember just like standing up crying, looking at the TV. So, I mean,
dude, I was at freaking
Buddy's Pizza.
What's that? Buddy's Pizza. I was just hammered off Two Hearted and just bawling my eyes out because we were favored to win that game and just blew it, man. What a heart, because they lost to Notre Dame game 1 and won 10 straight games. Going into Ohio State, favored in Columbus. I mean, it was like, as a Michigan fan, I was like, this is the dream. We're going to beat Ohio State and do it in Columbus. This is going to be amazing. And then just ripped my heart out of my chest, man. And it's been downhill ever since then.
Fun fact, I was in South Bend for game number 1, that was a loss, and in Columbus for game number 12, that was a loss. So
you need to stop going to fucking
yes.
maybe it's my
Stay
fault.
home.
It's definitely my fault. But I was at most of the wins in between, so I have to take credit for those too. But yeah, I mean, Jesus, it's just such a like, I don't even know how to put it. It's so unexplainable, right? Like, Brandon, you're trying to explain where his head is at. You're trying to explain where all these losses come from, how the, it just hasn't panned out, and the whole thing is unexplainable. So for we're coming to you as the expert analyst, and I don't think that anybody out there can explain it. Sam Webb, who literally, is good friends with Jim Harbaugh and talks to him all the time, he gets on the radio every day and can't explain it either. So I don't know who to ask. I don't know who to turn to for any explanation, and I don't think there's a right answer either, as far as like, go for somebody else. Because you talked about, actually, let's ask you about this, because I saw your article on the timetable as well, right? So if after 2020, which every single fan apparently wants him gone after 2020, right? Tell us about the timetable for them to try and find a new coach for 2021.
Yeah, it's crazy. And just to not challenge what you said, even if you don't want him gone, like, coaches don't finish their contract. You don't just be like, here's my 7th year, I'm done, see you later. Like, you can't do that. So it's not even about like wanting him or not wanting him. Like, it's shit or get off the pot time with him with his contract. Like, especially with as important as recruiting is in college football and as competitive as Michigan is on the recruiting trail with the other big boys, they need every advantage they can get to pull those kids that also have Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia and, all these, Notre Dame, all these other options. You can't have a coach sitting there with an expiring contract. So wherever you fall on the, I want Jim Harbaugh, I don't want him, that's not even really the point. It's the point is that his contract is expiring. So you can't just let him finish this year and then go into 2021 as the guy still and not have a plan in place. So the timeline is kind of crazy, because I've already said there's no way that I'll say, I think there's even less of a chance. There's no way Ward Manuel just fires him. I mean, if they get beat by Wisconsin this week and he still shows up on Monday for his press conference, that pretty much confirms for me that he's not getting fired. He's not. He's going to be able to stay as long as he wants, and that's that. I think it's just about as unlikely that he walks away on his own without another job already lined up. I don't like that would be him conceding, admitting that he can't get it done at Michigan, admitting that he can't beat Ohio State, admitting that he can't win a Big Ten title. I don't think he's got that in him. Even if he believes it, I don't think he can show that. Like, I'm just done, I'm quitting, I'm going away. Plus, he's not that old. He's only 56. I'm sure he wants to continue coaching. But if you quit a job like Michigan when you played at Michigan and you're from Michigan, a lot of other places are going to say, like, he might just not have it anymore. He's about to hang the whistle up for good. So I just don't think that, optics-wise, I don't think he can do that. So then you start to say, okay, then what needs to happen is you need to wait for an NFL team to give him a job. Michigan's last regular season game is December 12th against Ohio State. I expect that to be an absolute bloodbath. So that's going to look awful. So then they'll play one more meaningless, 9th game against the 3rd or 4th team, maybe 5th team. God, 5th team in the West. See how that goes. Lots riding on that one. I'm sure they'll be fired up to play that 9th game. And then, so that's December 19th. And the NFL season ends on January 3rd. So for an NFL team to offer Jim Harbaugh a job, it's not the earliest it could probably happen is like the 4th, the Monday the 4th. Probably later than that, though, if you think about how these things work and working out deals and ironing out the contracts and stuff. So you're now into like the first or early second part of the week, early second week in January, where, the other teams across the country who don't have a problem firing their coach mid-year or are going to axe him as soon as double zeros hits on their last game on the 12th or the 19th, where I can't remember exactly where all the conferences end. I think most of them it's the 19th because the playoff committee picks their teams on the 20th. So the 20th is the last day. That's the last day for college football because that's when the playoff teams will be picked. So on the 19th and the 20th, you're going to have college teams across the country cutting their coaches loose. So they're going to have from the 20th till at the very earliest January 4th to have a jump start on Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, if that's how it ends up playing out. Maybe they don't even fire him, they do extend him, and he's here again. I don't know. But if they do move on from him after this year, that's the earliest that it's going to be, because I don't think Ward Manuel is going to fire him, and Jim's not going to leave on his own. So that means you've got from December 20th to January 4th minimum, where everybody else across the country can go grab Luke Fickell, can go grab Matt Campbell, can go grab Brent Venables, can go grab Tony Elliott, while Michigan's sitting on their hands waiting for something to happen. And then what? Then all right, let's extend Jim 3 more years and see what happens. I just think like the timeline is going to be bad. The options potentially could be bad at that point, especially when there's not like really a home run guy to begin with. And I don't really think Michigan should settle. And some of those options might be settling, and certainly would be viewed that way by a lot of fans. So it's a bad timeline for how I think things are going to play out. Now I'm making a lot of guesses here, and there certainly are a lot of moving parts, and a lot of it's hypothetical. But if you guys disagree or think anything I said sounds stupid, let me know, because that's how I see it going.
No, I honestly think Michigan fans should just be getting ready to have Jim Harbaugh as their coach in 2021 and probably beyond, honestly. And so I know that, like, going on social media, I know you guys do too, and it's like literally the whole talk is like Matt Campbell, Luke Fickell. Everyone's just talking about who should we get next, and I think everyone should just prepare to not be having that conversation. Or, yeah, you can keep having that conversation, but you'll have it in 2021, you'll have it in 2022. As long as Ward is the AD, I just don't think that he's going to make a move. It's his buddy. It's all this stuff. Larry Lage talked about it on our last podcast, and he just thinks that this administration still backs this team. So prepare yourselves, fans. Like we're preparing ourselves, and I think we could be in for a long another 3-4 years or something if that's the case. And so so we've talked about Harbaugh long enough now, and I feel like it's like
I got one thing. I have one thing.
All right, go for it.
What's his legacy if he finishes 0-10 against Ohio State? I mean, Jesus.
Honestly, the whole decade?
Bring a new definition to the 10-year war, huh?
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you've got to. I mean, if you're going 0-10 against Ohio State, you at least have to have a winning record against Michigan State. And too bad Notre Dame's not on the schedule anymore. You don't have another rival that you can really talk about beating. So I mean, he's 500, like Brandon, like you said earlier, he's 500 against other big name teams. He doesn't really have a dominant record against anybody that matters. So I don't know. It's not good.
Yeah, that almost makes me think of like what Joel Klatt always talks about in terms of like the Michigan tradition, right? I mean, he's always talking about like your expectations are way out of whack with reality, right? Michigan is not a, 12-1 team. It's a 9-3 team, and you got a 9-3 coach. So you're right where you need to be. So I would almost say if he went 0-10 versus Ohio State, it would almost be time for us as fans to reevaluate our expectations for the program.
What's, in your guys' opinion, I've been asked this a lot and I've thought about it, and I'm actually not great at recall. Like, you guys are better than me at that already. I can tell. You're like, oh, in 2016 this happened. I'm like, dog, I was there. I don't even remember that. But anyway, what's Jim Harbaugh's best win? Is it Notre Dame?
Notre Dame last year.
I think so too. And like, what? Cool. Like a random middle of the season, like. Yeah, it was a great game.
I'd say either that or Florida in that bowl game, in the first bowl game, 2015.
Or the other one that comes to mind is at Michigan State, 2018, I believe, when they were. Yeah. That was like his first ranked on the road win, which Michigan State ended up not good, but it was still at the time. Yeah.
Was that Peppers taking the 2-point conversion back? Yeah, I mean that one felt like okay, turned a corner, state's done. That it had that feel like opponent wise, yeah, it wasn't like oh man they beat that team. That's amazing. But I'm with you. I would think probably the Notre Dame game last year, the first Florida Bowl win, and then Wisconsin when it was like a top 10 or 15 matchup, the Jordan Lewis, one hand, and then that state game. Those are the only four that you kind of can hang your hat on, and they're just not that great. Like they're good wins. I think you can make an argument he doesn't have one great signature win in his whole time at Michigan, and that's like how is that possible in five and a half seasons? That's crazy.
The thing that blows my mind of how that's not possible is how many big games does Michigan play in? Every game ends up as a big win because they are Michigan, right? It's either prime time or they're ranked too high and it's a top 10 game. Like he's had so many opportunities and he's fallen short on nearly all of them. And so that's what is more like that's what stands out more to me because it's not like, Michigan State has two big games every year. Let's say prior to Mel Tucker and D'Antonio's last years, they had two big games all year, and it was usually Ohio State and Michigan, right? And so that's not the case for Michigan. Every first game of the year, like when they play at Notre Dame or they play at Ohio State, Penn State's a big game every year. Michigan State's a big game. They have 4 to 5 big games every year, and chances for Harbaugh to have signature wins, and he's fallen short in the majority of those.
Yeah, and over as an underdog, and Michigan's not an underdog a lot, but that one to me too. Like every coach in the country, like literally has a couple. I mean, even like a shitty Kansas team or like Iowa State a couple years. Matt Campbell, if you want to talk about him, he's beaten Oklahoma, he's beaten TCU, he's beaten every
team every team in the Big 12, I believe, actually.
Every coach out there has a couple. I mean, teams are underdogs for a reason. They're not as good as the other team, so generally they go the other way. But every coach has got a couple. He's got none. I mean, that to me is another just a huge detriment to what you. However, for the people that are still defending him, I just don't know how you can defend a handful of those key things. The 0-6 against Ohio State, even though they're amazing. The 0 as an underdog. And the no signature wins, the 500 against Michigan State, the 4 bowl losses in a row, like those are just all the marquee things you would put up on a coach's resume. He gets a big red X instead of a green check for me, and I don't know how you can still be on board with that in year 6.
Well, whether we like it or not, he is coaching this week against Wisconsin. And so Michigan is hosting the Badgers in a night game, prime time. Still no fans, obviously. But let's do a little prediction here for Michigan versus Wisconsin. Obviously, we still, as we talked about before, don't know a ton about Wisconsin. But we do know a lot about Michigan, I guess, at this point, and not a lot of it's good. So I'll start with Jack. Jack, what's your prediction for this weekend?
All right, boys, I'm gonna do my best. No, I'm not. Okay, I'm full fandom again. I'm full back on the fandom. Wisconsin hasn't played in 2 weeks. They beat down the Illinois team that sucks. Okay, they did the same thing to Illinois that we did to Minnesota. I think these teams are more evenly matched than – I mean, the spread shows it, that Wisconsin's a 3.5-point favorite. So I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think Milton improves again. I'm hoping Josh Gaddis realizes this is a pass-first team and gets Milton out of the pocket a little bit, maybe on first and second down, rolling out, finding some receivers, giving him an option to run if he needs to. I think Milton has a big game. I think Mertz has a big game. And I see both teams scoring in the 40s. Man, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. And I'm hoping that Michigan can keep the tradition of beating Wisconsin at home, and they come out with a victory.
All right, Kalen, what's up? What do you got?
Yeah, I'm to the point now where I'm like, I'll believe it when I see it. So I don't think they're going to be totally demolished, but I got to see the capability of the secondary to actually deal with Graham Mertz throwing the ball at you. So I think, they might figure out a little bit of something on offense, score some points, but I'm looking at 31-21 Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'll give mine here, and we'll end it with Brandon. But I think mine's more on Kalen's. I think that Wisconsin's probably not. They're not going to score as much as they did on Illinois because Illinois is that bad. Like as bad as Michigan's look, they're not Illinois bad. But I still think they're going to exploit Michigan's secondary. They might be Illinois bad. Who knows? At this point, it feels like they are. But I think that I do think Milton figures it out a bit. I don't think they. I think they come up short. I'm gonna say 28-17 because I think Wisconsin's defense is pretty damn good. So, all right, Brandon, what do you got?
Yeah, to me, it's like, where's this? We asked the question earlier. Where's Jim Harbaugh's head? Where's this team's head? I mean, have they packed it in now because of how bad it's been and who they've lost to and how it's looked and how frustrating it must be? Missing a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, who is one of the emotional leaders of the defense, and you saw him pregame, I think both weeks. I didn't see it during the Minnesota week, but just getting everybody juiced up and fired up, and he's obviously not going to be out there. I'm with Kalen until I see. I said after I picked him to beat Michigan State, everybody picked him to beat Michigan State. I was like, how the hell did that happen? Okay, this is Michigan and Indiana. There's a reason they haven't won in 33 years. There's a reason why Michigan sends guys to the league and Indiana really doesn't. Like, Michigan's not going to let that shit happen. Like, it was so bad against Michigan State. There's no way those coaches do that stuff again. It just can't happen, and it did. So after the Indiana game, I said, I'm not going to be duped again. Like, they have fooled me for the last time. So until it looks so different, I'm picking them to lose, like against teams with a pulse anyway. And you could say the Michigan State thing just blows. I just go back to that every week. They lost that team. Like, how does that happen? They got drilled by Iowa by like 50. How does Michigan lose to that team?
Michigan State, I think, is honestly going to go 1-7. And they're going to hang their hat on that one Michigan win.
So I do think some guys will be ready to run through a brick wall. I think some guys are going to be like, hey, I just don't have anything left to give. I know that's bad to say, fourth game of the season, but Wisconsin 34, Michigan 24. That's what I see.
You guys don't think Wisconsin's scoring 40? The faith you have in this Michigan defense is beautiful, and it really gets me excited for this game.
I will have one hot take. My one hot take.
Hold on. We're gonna go one more round for 0-90. You gotta save it for that.
Okay, good.
I'm trying to wait. What did they score on Illinois?
45. And also, I didn't give a score prediction. I said in the 40s. I'm gonna say Michigan 45, Wisconsin 42. That's my score prediction.
I don't know, man. I'm with you're on an island here because nobody fucking believes in this team, dude. Nobody believes.
At least I know Wisconsin's going to score 42. That's a guarantee. I'm hoping for the Michigan getting up there.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, let's do it. We're pretty long in this one. So, Brandon, do you know what the deal is for 0-90? Did we do that last time with you?
I do not. That is new to me.
All right. So basically, it's a hot take, 30 seconds. You get to just kind of spit out whatever's on your brain. It can be about Michigan. It can be about Harbaugh. It can be about sports in general. We've had some about ice cream. You can do literally anything you want. So
doing that for 90 minutes.
Basically 0-90 minutes at this point. Yeah. So we'll start with us, and then we'll end with you, so you can have a little time to think on it. So, Jack, are you ready with yours?
I am.
All right, your 0-90 starts now.
All right. So every week, tailgating, watching the game, at least first half, I've been drinking beer. We're in the game 4 now. Michigan's, we're not really sure what's going on. We need to do anything we can do. And once I started drinking liquor last game, Michigan kind of started to heat things up and get things rolling. So I'm going to switch to liquor for this game. I'm going to start drinking Bullet right at kickoff. And like I said, Michigan, I'm going to double down. Michigan 45, Wisconsin 42. The liquor is going to keep us going. And Michigan win. Big win Saturday night.
I like it. I like it. I did tweet it out at halftime of Indiana that if you hadn't switched to liquor by then, like you better start because it's not going to get any better. So I like that. That could be the key to victory. It could be.
Could be.
We'll see. All right, Kalen, what do you got for us? Your 0 to 90 starts now.
Yeah, well, I know that I said Wisconsin would win the game, final score 31-21, but I do think that there will be something good in the secondary. I think they will get one turnover in the secondary. So that's a hot take. Jack, good luck remembering the game.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll be blacked out at halftime and after we watch it on Sunday.
They're going to give him some opportunities, so I think it's not a bad take. And they had what, 2 drop picks against Indiana, I think. So it's not a bad take. All right, who's got me here?
All right, bro. You ready?
Yep.
Your 0 to 90 starts now.
All right, so I think that Joe Milton had some really good momentum going in the second half of Indiana. He threw that bad interception first. Obviously, he had the second one that was just a Hail Mary that they came down with. I think he's going to start moving in the pocket like we talked about Brandon earlier. They're going to have him on scrambles, on bootlegs and everything else. He's going to start working. I think that Joe Milton throws for 300 plus again, and I think that'll be 3 games in a row that he's scored, or no, yeah. I don't know. I think so, but yeah. So I think that's gonna be, and that's got to be a Michigan record for the past, I don't know how many years. So I think Joe Milton's gonna start moving the ball here, and that this wide receiver crew is gonna get it together. I still think the defense isn't good enough to hold them to that many points. I think Joe Milton looks pretty good, which honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, goes against my score prediction that I literally just said. But fuck it. So I don't know. He's gonna look good. So, thanks, you guys. Yeah, that was really good by me. I'm really really good at this prediction stuff.
You're really good, man.
All right. Brandon, you ready? You got something for us?
Yeah, I'm gonna lay down a little bit of advice for you young bucks, okay? This is not really a hot take. I'm sure you've been hearing it your whole life, but having a kid is no fucking joke. No joke. Talked about it. Talked about why I couldn't get on the podcast before. Look, dude, my son, I'm a brag right now. My son is the man, dude. He's the man.
Look at that kid.
Yeah, there you go.
In this picture, he's wearing a shirt. It's a Michigan shirt, if you can see it. It says Brown #1 on the back that my uncle got for me when I was born. So that's dope. But game time comes on, he wants to yell and cry. Want to go to bed at night and do some work? He wants to yell and cry. Want to get on a podcast with you guys? He wants to yell and cry. No, like, I'm being kind of silly, but like, dude, you hear all the time, like, it's a life changer. It's amazing. It's not that amazing. Kind of sucks a lot. It's filled with some amazing flashes, but like these people who are all about like it's a change. That's horseshit. It's not like rarely like doing this. Like it's amazing. Like that's a small sliver of what to do. Love my son. Wouldn't change a thing. Make sure you're ready. Fellas, you young fellas there, make sure you're ready. That's it.
I told you guys by the end of this episode, Brandon was gonna be hammered, and he said it's party time, man.
Listen,
we got him loose now.
I have like this internal conversation with myself all the time. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what? Who talked us into this? Like, seriously? But no, I mean, like. And then so you have all that like where you want to just like I literally want to like flee the country, and then he like looks at you and says dad like once, and you're like, all right, it's dope. But none of you have kids, I don't believe, right? And so just
not yet.
Make sure your shit's lined up before you do that.
My timeline just got extended about 5 years before I'm having a kid. So
yeah,
thank
speaking
you.
of contract extensions, yeah.
Exactly. So, All right, that might have been our greatest 0 to 90 ever. That was beautiful. Thanks, Brandon. So you can follow Brandon for more of that content at BSB Wolverine on Twitter. I believe you're Coach Brown 3 on Instagram. Is that right?
Yep.
And you've got a little plug your shoe thing here. You've been doing some custom cleats here too.
Yeah, so it's just kind of random how it started. Like last fall, I was actually supposed to do a pair for Andre Selden, who's now a freshman at Michigan. He was at Belleville. Belleville was the #1 team in the state. He gave me a pair. He's like, dude, I want to wear these for the state championship. And then they got upset by Brighton, so they didn't make it. And then he was an early enrollee. He's now at Michigan. He's wearing Jordan Brand. You know, he doesn't need a pair. He's probably got 50 pairs of cleats now. Yeah. So I had his cleats like forever, just sitting in my basement. Like, what am I going to do with these things? I gave them to someone else, and then they just kind of took off. So that kid's friend hit me up. This kid's friend hit me up. So now I've done a couple pairs at Cass Tech, a couple at King, one at West Bloomfield. It just turned out to be a pretty cool thing. It's something I've always been into. The My Cause, My Cleats thing in the NFL, I think is really cool. Now guys are wearing them like every week. It used to just be like one specialized week where they would wear the custom shoes. But, I've got an art background, blend that in with my football background a little bit, and it's something that's pretty cool. Hope to get it on the big stage, man. Talking to you, Mike Onwenu, he's probably not going to see this, but he's supposed to send me a pair. He keeps ghosting me on Twitter, but Ambry Thomas is supposed to do. So it's just, I decided to call it Coach's Customs. I don't know if that'll stick or not because I've been using Instagram more for it, and that's been my Instagram name since I was coaching back in 2000, 8, 9, 10. Pretty cool thing. Make a little side money and, see what happens.
Well, you're lucky that Mike is an avid listener. He and Bill, Mr. Belichick, sit down every time a new episode comes out and they listen. So you're lucky. Mike will make sure to get those to you.
Supposed to do a pair of cleats for Onwenu and a custom hoodie for Bill. So I'm looking forward to that. And no, I'm kidding. That was
Would love to see that. Would love to see that.
Yeah, really supposed to do a pair for Mike though. He was all about it. Actually, do I have a second? I got a second. This is Mike Onwenu's cleats right here. He gave me these to do for him in the summer before he moved to a Boston area. I'm not sure where he lives. These were the cleats he got at the combine. They're not 370-pound lineman cleats. They're like, Speed Vapor, Nike Jets, whatever. But they're size 16. He's never going to wear them. But I'm supposed to do something with them. Just haven't got around to it. But now that he's starting, he's like, dude, I want a real pair that I'm gonna wear in the game. So hoping he sends me those, and eventually I'll get those back to him too. But yeah, appreciate the platform there to talk about it. It's pretty cool. It's been fun to do.
Yeah, and so that's your side gig, but you're full time now, the publisher of WolverineDigest.com. So you can go check out his articles. He's got Eric Rutter, who's our guy. He's been on our podcast here too, doing articles for him there as well. And then, like I said, at BSB Wolverine, so go follow him on Twitter. Thanks for listening. You can follow us at Blue by 90 on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and then at Blue by 90 Podcast on YouTube as well, where we post some videos there too. So follow us on Apple, Spotify, and everything else, wherever you get your podcasts as well. Thanks for listening, and go Blue.
Go Blue.
Go Blue.